I had only been travel blogging for about a year before one of my reviews of an old traditional hotel went viral. The hotel invited me and paid me to review it further, and that is when I realized that my passion could mint me some old Benjamins. Just 4 months into this new business, Eli Fitzgerald, owner of an old mountain lodge, invited me to review it for its grand Christmas reopening. The lodge had been closed for nearly a century, buried in an avalanche, but Eli's team had restored it. I figured it would be a quiet week in the Rockies, a good story for the blog. When I arrived, the place felt wrong. It wasn't just the lodge itself, massive and looming, as if it had grown out of the mountains, but the staff, too. They were dressed in clothes from another era, bow ties and long skirts, and spoke in a stilted, old-fashioned way. They didn't really smile. Eli greeted me at the door, his tall figure draped in a thick coat, his eyes too sharp, too cold. "Mr. James, welcome. You'll find it very peaceful here." Peaceful? Maybe, but the whole place had a strange atmosphere, like it was holding its breath. I settled into my room, a cozy enough space with a fireplace and large bed. The wind howled outside, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Still, the long trip had worn me out, so I lay down and tried to sleep. It was just past midnight when I woke to the sound of children laughing. The high-pitched giggles echoed through the hallways, followed by the faintest melody, a piano playing Silent Night, which I remembered from when I tried my hands at instruments in college. Confused, I checked my phone. 12:47 a.m. Eli had told me I was the only guest, so who were the kids? And the music? I opened my door, stepped into the hall, and listened. The laughter faded, but the music continued, like it was drifting from somewhere deep within the lodge. I followed it down to the lobby, expecting to find some explanation. A stereo, maybe, or a staff member playing the piano. But when I got there, the lobby was empty. The piano, covered in dust, hadn't been touched in years. I asked Eli about it the next morning. "I heard kids laughing last night, and music. Thought you said I was the only one here." Eli didn't blink. "You are, Mr. James. The wind can play tricks on the ears around these parts. I hope you would mention that the lodge brings out an old-world charm, especially in the nights." His calm, unbothered response left me uneasy, but I didn't press it. I explored the lodge that day, snapping pictures for the blog, and that's when I found the letters. There was a loose floorboard in my room. After stepping on it a few times, I pried it up out of curiosity. Beneath it, tied together with twine, was a stack of yellowed letters written by someone named Jeremiah Hughes, who built the lodge over a century ago. There was a picture of his accompanying the letters, dressed in an old three-piece suit, a pocket watch to his breast pocket, and a long, wavy mustache. The first few letters were harmless enough, talking about the beauty of the lodge and how his family loved the mountains. But as I read on, the letters grew darker. "There is something wrong with this place. At night I hear it, whispers, scratching at the walls. It wants something from us, and I fear we cannot refuse." Another letter, written days before the avalanche, chilled me to the bone. "The ritual is the only way. We must appease it, or it will take us all." That night, I don't really know how else to say it, but the lodge came alive. The whispering started around midnight, faint at first, like someone just outside my door. I pulled the blankets tighter, trying to ignore it, but then I heard my name. James. Shot up, heart pounding, and saw shadows moving along the walls. They writhed and twisted in ways that didn't make sense, like they were alive, slithering toward me. I backed away, cold sweat dripping down my neck, but they kept coming. "James, come back." I ran out of the room, my footsteps echoing down the hall, but no matter where I went, the whispers followed me, calling out my name. The walls seemed to close in on me, pulsing like they were breathing, and just when I tried to look out the window in the dark, the glass fogged, like someone had blown hot air on it. I took some steps back and reminded myself that I might be imagining things due to being alone at this place, but just when the deep breathing calmed down, I felt someone's cold hand gripping mine. I yelled and ran down the stairs. Thankfully, in the lobby, I found Eli standing by the fireplace, his back towards me. "I need to leave right now. There is some strange shit going on at this lodge." Eli didn't turn around. "It's too late. The house has been disturbed. It doesn't let go easily." My blood ran cold. I didn't care what he meant. I just wanted to get out. I grabbed my coat, ran to my car, and drove down the mountain as fast as I could, not caring about the luggage that I had left behind. As fate would have it, I learned in the news that a sudden avalanche swallowed the lodge early in the morning, taking its new owner with it. Rescue efforts were underway for a week when the authorities finally reached to my luggage. They found my phone and laptop and sent it back to me. My laptop never worked again, but I was surprised that my phone fired up. Gathering courage, I decided to check the photos and videos, which I had clicked of the place to post on my blog. To my surprise, in those pictures were captured children and people dressed in old dresses whom I had never seen. And then, in one picture, I saw a man sitting on a chair next to my bed. He was dressed in an old three-piece suit, a pocket watch to his breast pocket, and carried a long, wavy mustache. The original owner of the lodge, Mr. Jeremiah Hughes. It started out like any other evening, just me and Emily, my little sister, heading to McDonald's after school. It was one of those harmless rituals we did whenever we had a chance. Emily loved the place, especially the indoor playground, and I didn't mind. It gave me a break, a chance to sip on a Coke and scroll through my phone while she burned off energy. The place was almost empty when we walked in. A few families scattered around, the occasional soft beep of the fryers behind the counter, and the fluorescent lights that always felt a bit too harsh. It should have felt normal, safe even, but the moment we sat down, something felt off. I can't explain it, call it gut instinct, but the second we walked in, I had this eerie sense that we weren't alone, not in the usual way. Someone was watching us.
"Stop it, Sarah."
I scolded myself. Emily was happy. I should have been too. How could I when I spotted him? A man, sitting alone near the front, huddled in a dirty gray hoodie, his hair sticking out in greasy strands. His eyes, though, those were what chilled me. They were fixed, almost unblinking, on Emily as she played with the interactive display near the counter. She was completely unaware, tapping the screen with her usual bubbly enthusiasm. But his gaze, it was cold and hungry. I tried to shake it off as I ordered. I mean, it's a public place, right? I told myself he was probably just some random guy, maybe a little rough around the edges. No big deal. But the way he was watching her, it unnerved me. By the time I sat down with our food, he was still there, unmoved, his focus unwavering. I glanced at Emily, then back to him. His eyes shifted the moment I caught him. For a split second, our gazes locked, and something about the way he looked away, like I wasn't supposed to notice him, sent a wave of nausea through me. I should have grabbed Emily then. I should have left, but I didn't. Instead, I watched her run off to the playground area, giggling as she disappeared into the maze of plastic tubes and slides. I tried to relax, telling myself I was being paranoid. I mean, what could happen? There were other people around, workers, families. But when I glanced back at the front of the restaurant, the man was standing. He wasn't leaving, though. No, he was standing near the door, watching Emily again. His eyes darting toward me occasionally, but always returning to her. My heart kicked up in my chest. Go talk to the manager, I thought. Tell someone. But just as I was about to stand up, he turned and stepped outside, disappearing into the parking lot. Relief washed over me. He was gone. Or so I thought. We ate quickly, my nerves still on edge, and I let Emily play a little longer, thinking the worst was over. I got up to throw our trash away, and when I glanced toward the playground, my heart froze. Emily was gone. Somehow, in the span of mere seconds, he had slipped back into the restaurant. I hadn't even seen him come in, but now he wasn't just watching. He was moving, fast. He was walking out with Emily in his arms, struggling. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I screamed her name, the sound ripping from my throat, raw and desperate.
Emily!
I ran. Everything around me blurred. Tables, chairs, people. None of it mattered. The only thing I could focus on was that filthy hand gripping her, pulling her toward the exit. Her small body twisted, trying to break free, but he was strong, too strong. She screamed, and the sound of it, that high-pitched, terrified scream, shattered something inside me. I lunged at him, clawing at his arm, his hoodie, anything I could reach. He grunted, his face twisted in frustration, and for a moment it felt like he might win, like he might rip her away from me and disappear into the night. "You bitch!" he hissed. But then, a worker, a teenage boy no older than me, came running. He grabbed the man's other arm and suddenly, the stranger's grip loosened. He shoved Emily to the floor, and before I could react, he was gone, bolting through the door, vanishing into the dark. I held Emily, shaking. Both of us cried while people crowded around us. Voices blended into a murmur of concern and disbelief, but I didn't care about them. All I cared about was Emily, her small body trembling in my arms, her face pale and tear-streaked. The police came, of course. They asked questions, took statements, but it didn't matter. The man was gone, vanished like smoke. And no matter how much they reassured me, I knew deep down they wouldn't find him. And for weeks, life went on, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Every time I passed a McDonald's, every time I heard the squeak of a playground slide or the shuffle of feet in the crowd, my heart would race, my breath would catch, and I'd find myself scanning the faces around me, waiting to see him again. And then one day, I did. I was with Emily, walking through the mall, when I felt it, the same cold, prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I turned, and there he was, standing near the entrance, his hoodie pulled tight over his face, watching us. I froze, terror clawing at my throat. He smiled, a slow, crooked smile, and disappeared into the crowd. And I knew he was waiting for another chance, waiting for us. "I'd always prefer her over you. I'd burn for her." I had overheard my son Jason yelling in the garage just before he pulled the car out. I still remember the way it had all begun, quiet and peaceful, but ominous in hindsight. Our family piled into the car for our yearly visit to Matthew, my husband's grave. It was Jason, his wife Lisa, their twins, and of course, Jules. Jules had been the kids' caregiver for about a year, helping out around the house. She had become family, the daughter I never had. Jason insisted Jules sit in the front with him, leaving Lisa to tend to the kids in the back. I noticed the way Lisa stiffened, her eyes darkening for just a moment before she forced a polite smile. That was Lisa, always composed, putting my son before herself, even when something ate her away. But there was no hiding the tension that hung in the air, thick and stifling. I should have said something, anything, but I chose silence, and that was my worst mistake. At the cemetery, the day stretched long and dull as we cleaned the grave. The kids ran around, laughing, while Jules helped with the cleaning, always staying close to Lisa and closer to Jason. I noticed, and so did Lisa. I caught her watching them when she thought no one was looking. Her hands gripped the gardening shears so tightly that her knuckles turned white, while Jason, oblivious or maybe indifferent, chatted away with Jules like it was just another day. Little did we know, it wasn't. The ride back home was silent, save for the occasional giggles from the kids. Lisa stared out the window, pale like a ghost. Jason was unusually quiet too, but his actions screamed betrayal. The casual brush against Jules's thigh as he shifted gears, the stolen glances, the shy smiles. That evening, after dinner, I kissed the kids goodnight and waved Jason and Lisa off to bed. The unease in Lisa's eyes hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened. Jason, on the other hand, seemed carefree, already a bit tipsy from the wine he'd downed after dinner. And Jules? She lingered, helping tidy up the kitchen before heading home. Too helpful, too involved. Everything in the air was wrong. but once again I remained quiet as I slipped into my bed. I must have fallen asleep at around midnight, but my dreams were restless, haunted by images I couldn't quite grasp. Then it happened. A scream ripped through my slumber, yanking me from a nightmare, only to push me into another. For a moment, I thought it was still dreaming, until the smell of smoke hit me, thick and suffocating. I sprinted down the hall, my heart pounding in my chest. The kids were already outside crying, surrounded by neighbors who had rushed to help. The house was bathed in orange. Flames licked at the walls, devouring everything in their path. But it wasn't the crackling of the fire or the roar of the flames that chilled me to my core. It was the screams, raw, agonizing, coming from inside. My children's voices, Jason and Lisa, were trapped inside, burning alive. I can still feel the way I fought to get them, my legs like lead, my body lurched forward with every desperate breath. Neighbors held me back as I thrashed, screamed for Jason, for Lisa.
Let me go! They're gonna die!
My voice was broken, hoarse from the smoke and the terror that gripped my chest. Hot tears cut through the soot on my face as I begged, but their grip only tightened. The fire roared louder, and all I could do was watch. Soon, siren wailed. The fire trucks arrived, but it was already too late. When they pulled Lisa out, her body was barely recognizable, charred beneath layers of blackened skin. But she was alive, just barely breathing. Alive. But my Jason didn't make it. The flames had consumed him, leaving only ash. At first, they said it was an electrical fire, faulty wiring, they assumed. It made sense with an old house like ours. Fires like that happen all the time. Investigators nodded and scribbled in their little notepads, shaking their heads like it was just a sad, tragic accident. But I knew it wasn't, not even close. A week later, when Lisa finally woke up in the hospital, her voice was raspy and weak, but her words, they were chillingly clear. She had discovered Jason's affair with Jules, found texts and voicemails laid out before her like a death sentence. That day at the cemetery, she'd simmered in her own rage, quietly plotting. She had waited for Jason to pass out, drunk and oblivious, after they had the argument. He confessed, thinking she would forgive him like always, but this time Lisa didn't forgive. She started the fire, watching as it spread as Jason slept through the beginning of the flames. She wanted it to look like an accident, the thought that something like this could hide behind her calm demeanor, her steady hands. It's terrifying. What kind of darkness had she been carrying all this time? Why didn't she reach out? As they wheeled Lisa away from the police, I stood there, staring at the empty shell of our home, at the blackened remains where my son had died. Could I have stopped it? Could I have said something? Done something? I replayed every moment, every glance, every conversation. If I had spoken up, if I had confronted Jason, if I had taken Lisa aside. But now, it was too late. My silence had cost me everything I owned. I still hear the crackling of the flames in my dreams, and sometimes, if I listen close enough, I can still hear Lisa's scream mingling with the roar of the fire. It wasn't the scream of a woman in pain. It was the scream of someone who had finally snapped. I transferred to Crestmore College to escape the mess I'd made of my life. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but then I got to know about the attacks. The rumors were vague, but unsettling. A masked figure dressed as a WWE wrestler assaulting students at random. I figured it was just campus folklore, until one night, I met him. I had stayed late in the library, cramming for midterms. When I left, the campus was eerily quiet. No late-night chatter, no footsteps, just fog creeping around the manicured lawns. I was really sleepy, so I didn't even bother to check the two cute girls making out behind the bushes along the way. When I got to my dorm, the door was slightly ajar. That's when I sensed something was wrong. Did I forget to lock it? I pushed the door open cautiously, stepping into the darkness. The light switch did nothing. The power was out. The door slammed shut behind me, the bang echoing in the silence. I grabbed my phone, its weak flashlight trembling in my hand. That's when I saw him. Standing ahead was a man in a Rey Mysterio mask and a grotesque grin. He wore dark, ragged clothes, but he sure scared the hell out of me. What the hell? He tilted his head like he was sizing me up, then spoke in a low, raspy voice. You've disrupted the spectrum. Before I could move, he lunged. His boot slammed into my stomach and I went flying into my desk. The air knocked from my lungs. I scrambled to get up, but he was on me fast. He twisted my arm behind my back, forcing me to the ground. You're distorting the frequencies, yeah. Help! I screamed. I elbowed him in the ribs, managing to break free. I almost got to the door, but he blocked my path and swung a sharp kick, sweeping my legs out from under me. Pain shot through my body as I hit the floor again. The guy was relentless, moving with an eerie grace, like he knew exactly how to inflict pain. He grabbed me by the throat, lifting me off the ground. My vision blurred, my breaths ragged. His words were nonsense, but his intent wasn't. The patterns, they need to be restored. With my last bit of strength, I grabbed a pillow from the bed and shoved it into his face. He loosened his grip and I bolted for the closet, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart raced as I crouched in the dark, trying to stay quiet. Outside, I could hear him, his footsteps taunting. Hide and seek? Oh yeah, the patterns always repeat, Roy. He knew my name. How did he know my name? The door ripped open and he stood there, bathed in the dim light from the window. Without thinking, I grabbed a metal hanging rod and swung it at his head. He staggered back, giving me a chance to rush him. We collided into the bookshelf behind, books crashing to the floor. He recovered fast, grabbing me by the throat again. His grip was tight, and the edges of my vision started to fade. I thought it was over. Then suddenly, he let go. I crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. The masked man stood over me, tilting his head as if listening to something only he could hear. Oh, Martha's a-calling. He walked out, vanishing into the foggy hallway without another word. Shaking, I locked the door and called campus security. They arrived quickly, but after a half-hearted search, they found nothing. The officer just shrugged. Probably just some kind of prank. I'm bleeding. Does it look like a prank to you? I knew what I saw. The masked man had left marks on me, bruises, scratches, and probably a broken bone. The next few days, I started asking around quietly. I found other students who had been attacked, but they were too scared to go to the authorities. A music major had been assaulted in the practice rooms, accused of silencing melodies. An art student was attacked in the studio, the masked man ranting about corrupting colors. The pattern made no sense, but the more I learned, the more it sounded like these attacks were about more than random violence. The guy had a fixation with sensory input, sound, color, energy. I had taken a new music class before dropping out in the previous semester, but when I looked for the common thread, I realized that the crazy man in mask had only targeted the students who had taken that class. I started digging into old campus records and found something strange. A year ago, there was a student group called MARTHA, Multimedia Arts Research and Therapeutic Healing Association. They explored the connection between art, music, and healing, but the program was shut down due to lack of funding. One student, Max, was heavily involved, who belonged to the same frat house as me. It didn't take much to put the pieces together. I inquired around and learned that he had run some kind of lab above a drug den close to campus. With a nervous heart, I entered the old abandoned multi-story, where the druggies from our college and around flocked. It was a scary experience, but I found some frat members there who bumped me in. I crossed the creepy, dirty, probably infected stairways of the place before reaching a locked room above where loud music played. I had a hunch this was it, but I was wise enough to not go and get beat up again. I went out of the house and called the cops, explaining everything. About an hour later, the cops infiltrated the drug den. It suddenly became chaos as drugged-up kids my age walked like zombies and desperately tried to run away. I kept on the lookout for Max. I had seen him once at a frat party before, so I was certain that I could recognize him. but I didn't even need to. The second floor window was suddenly broken, and out emerged a man on the shed wearing a Rey Mysterio mask. He howled, "Martha lives forever, oh yeah," before jumping down. I rushed ahead to find him screaming, one of his legs broken and a bone poking out. 2 cops arrived and cuffed him while he cried. As I started taking him away, he finally looked at me and realized that it was my doing. "You took my funding, yeah. You took my groundbreaking research away. You took my Nobel away. My Nobel. I will kill you. I will kill all of you. Rey Mysterio will take you down." After the police took him, I went inside to see his lab. There were Rey Mysterio posters everywhere, hundreds of buds of joints thrown around carelessly. The place was messy, but there were equipments and gadgets. Something inside him was definitely broken, and when he realized that he couldn't do anything about his research, he assumed the form of his favorite WWE star and attacked those he thought took his funding, the new music class students. It started like any other day. Just me, my delivery truck, and the endless loop of houses. I've been working for Amazon for a couple of months now. You get used to the routine, the predictability, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that day on Elm Street. I was nearing the end of my route when I pulled up in front of an old 2-story house. Just another stop, I thought. And then I saw her. A woman standing on the porch, arms crossed, her face twisted in something between anger and disgust. She was staring right at me. I parked along the curb, double-checked my list, and headed toward her neighbor's door. That's when I heard the voice.
You can't park here.
I turned to face her. She was standing at the edge of her property now, one foot planted firmly on the sidewalk, the other in her yard. Her eyes were wild, dilated almost. "Ma'am, I'm just delivering a package next door. I'll be out of here in 2 minutes.
I don't care.
Her voice cracked, but it wasn't the shrillness that got me. It was the calm undercurrent beneath it, like something dangerous was simmering just below the surface.
This is my street. You don't belong here.
I've dealt with rude customers before, but this was something else. There was something about the way she stood. Too still, too tense, that sent a cold ripple down my spine. I forced a smile and tried keeping my voice steady. "I think the streets belong to all your neighbors, including that one." I pointed to the house next dude. "And I'm just doing my job." For a second, I thought she might let it go, but then she stepped closer, blocking my path.
Leave. Now.
I hesitated. It wasn't just her words, it was the way she looked at me, like she knew something I didn't. I muttered something about finishing my job. I bypassed her and quickly dropped the package at the neighbor's door. In seconds, I got back to the truck. But as I drove off, and I glanced in the rearview mirror, I felt it. The inevitable promise of an impending doom. That weirdo was still there, standing in the middle of the street, watching me. I shrugged it off, thinking it was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Hours later, after a long day of deliveries, I found myself driving home, my mind drifting back to the woman on Elm Street. The way she looked at me had stuck, burrowing its way into my thoughts. I shook it off. I was just tired, I told myself. Too many deliveries, too little sleep. Then I noticed something as I neared Elm Street again. A shadow, a figure standing by the side of the road. Her. My stomach dropped. She was waiting for me, all this while? I slowed down, hoping to pass by unnoticed, but the moment she saw my truck, she stepped right into the street, arms crossed just like before. I had to hit the brakes to avoid hitting her.
Get out of the truck.
She ordered, her voice low, eerily calm. I didn't move. My heart was pounding now, each thud echoing in my chest. "Ma'am, I don't want any trouble. I'm just headed home." Her face twisted into a smile, but it wasn't comforting. It was too wide, too forced, like she was mimicking a human expression she'd forgotten how to use.
You think you can just come into my neighborhood, do whatever you want, and leave.
Something in her voice told me this wasn't just about parking, something deeper, something twisted. I'm leaving now, I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I shifted the truck into reverse. Her smile dropped.
Oh no, you're not.
She lunged toward my truck, her hands slamming against the hood. My breath hitched. What was she doing? I hit the gas, reversing down the street as fast as I could, tires screeching. In the rearview mirror, I heard her sprinting to the car, the engine roaring to life. She was coming after me. I floored it, speeding through the winding streets, headlights cutting through the thickening dusk. She was right behind me, her car barely inches from my bumper. The beams of her headlights flooded my mirrors, blinding me. My pulse raced as I swerved down a side street, praying she wouldn't follow. But she did. Every turn I took, she was right there, relentless. I could see her face now in the reflection of her headlights, contorted, unhinged. It was like she was enjoying this chase. Her faint giggles reached my ears as I raked my brain for possible escape. And just when I thought there was none, I spotted it. A narrow alleyway up ahead, just wide enough for my truck. Without thinking, I veered into it, scraping the sides of the vehicle as I barreled through. Her car wouldn't fit. I hoped it would slow her down. I parked in the shadows, killing the engine, holding my breath. Everything was silent for a moment. Then I heard it, the crunch of gravel, the slow roll of tires. She was circling the block, looking for me. My hands shook as I clutched the steering wheel, sweat dripping down my face. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, each thud louder than the last. I watched her car crawl past the alley, her headlights sweeping across the entrance. She had lost me, hopefully forever.